Swane in the program is in this session. You help bring me the program. I have it to my phone, I guess. Freaky, if you may come and sit in front. Pilani? Yeah. So, what we are now continuing with the narrative of our story, colleagues. You might have heard earlier from Sis Jackie to Swanepoel to Baswe, talking about inside the country and electronic warfare. What we are now going to do is to talk about two parts. One part is the front, in Swaziland in particular. Connie was based in Swaziland. She also trained in Angola under Swanepoel. And Connie is also a member of the organizing committee to make all this event a success. Again, thank you to you. And Connie also represents Msana. Can you bring another chair quickly? No? Yes. Chair. So what we are going to hear now is a story of the front line. From one of the women of communications unit who were based in Swaziland. And these are extremely brave women who really did extraordinary activities basically in the front. I will not waste any time. Let me get a spray.
Ngibonge Dr. Haba. Sanibonani. Hey, Mr. I could say what you can about presenting that I were not comfortable because the audience was a bit serious. Leadership here, Sis Jackie, Mam Baleka, the retired generals is within our midst. Siyabonga kakhulu ukuthi sibe la namhlanje. This day is quite an important day to all of us, especially the unsung heroes and heroines, because we normally speak and are normally told about those who normally appear in the TVs, who are highly regarded. But to those who are not known, who are not sung about, it's very rare that our people would know about them. Oh, let me also acknowledge the fact that there are those who are watching from their screens in their comfort of their homes, in the comfort of their homes. The first part of my presentation actually was deliberated upon at length. Mine is just to talk about my experience within, in Swaziland and slightly in Mozambique. You heard that Mrs. Jackie made mention of Comrade Tim. Comrade Tim is a Motswaledi. we happened to have two of them, Joe Mutwaledi, who was in the security section within the MK, and Comrade Tim was in the communications, deployed in Swaziland. I was deployed actually in Swaziland in 1997. After 1987, yeah, after my completion of my specialization course, actually in both Malanje and the USSR, now Soviet, now Russia. I got to Swaziland, which was then not an easy area. You will recall that after Nkomati Accord, things became very tense around Mozambique and Swaziland, and there were certain conditions in those areas. I think in Mozambique, we were only allowed 10 people to be declared, but in Swaziland, the situation was a bit different. We had quite notorious policemen there who were operating with our regime here, which are special forces. So when operating in Swaziland, you had to be extra careful. I think even those that were operating elsewhere, either than Swaziland and Mozambique, I understand they had to be careful. My experience then is when we were, maybe I needed to introduce myself again before. In Swaziland, I operated not as Constance Nkomo. In Swaziland, I operated as Phumzile Nhlabathi. And in Mozambique, I operated as Busi. I was well known as Busi. That name Busi actually is still used here inside the country. Many people know me as Busi more than Kholi and Phumzile. So those are the names that I used. I lived with our comrades from Netherlands while I was in Swaziland upon my arrival there. Those comrades were supporters, if you remember, the supporters of anti-apartheid then movement then. We had them also operating in Swaziland. So I stayed with them before I could continue to stay with the team and System V and with their sons. So our operation was quite easy because we would, well, before then I used a legend. My legend was that I was studying because I enrolled for executive secretarial course. So it was easy for me to actually integrate. So people would easily accept me as their own. I was Phumzile from Nhlangano. And if you remember Nhlangano is in the, is sharing a border with the KZN. So most people there mostly speak Zulu and Swati. So, and I was also fortunate that System V was from Nhlangano. So for me to understand the culture of Nhlangano, because in Swaziland you had to know who ubani, ubuya kuphi, isithakazelo sakho ubani, and all those things. So when you meet people, the locals, those are the first things they would ask you. So I was ready with those responses. So I think that really made it easier for me to exist within there. One of our first experience that I can recall was when we were around, we were looking for a spot around Baba with Comrade Tim. And we drove, looked up for a spot. We found a spot there where we could mount our radio and the antenna. And Comrade Tim was operating the radio, we had passers-by. We tried to be deeper into the bush, but unfortunately we couldn't get bushes like we had in Angola. But they were bush enough for us to can conceal ourselves, you know, in the bush. Unfortunately, one of us had to, you know, look for Iara Lapayana. You understand me, those who understand the language Iara. Yeah, we then realized that we had lots of people passing that area. You know, it was like a small passage where they would pass there. I remember us pretending to be kissing, you know, as they were passing. And the main thing that we needed to do was to really make sure that we turn our backs, you know, to cover the equipment so that even if they want to converse with us, there's no problem. They can't see behind us because everything would be put down deeper so that it's not easily exposed. So the second time we were, I think, around the bushes, around Manzini. And there, I think one of the people was a police person because he kept on going up, coming back, going up, coming back. And then we had to then stop everything and then just discuss a story, you know, eat and then must discuss a team during that time. So that was the advantage of me being with Ukomrete Utim because he was, although older but short, he was very short, Ukomrete Utim. So that's how we survived. I'm just mentioning two of those incidences because this police, what we thought was a policeman, he then stopped and asked us, no, sithandani niyathandana la ehlathini sithi yebo singayaphi ngoba sifuna ukuvela laphaya yabo. Hey, uyabona ukuthi uyasona niphetheni la asinalutho yabo sithi ihlalile nje. Uyasona and then up and down until Amuva. Unfortunately, that day we could not proceed. The difficulty was that during that time is that, especially operating around Mbabane, we had an embassy, Mbabane embassy there. Then we had a lot of game reserves. So those game reserves were either operated or owned by people from South Africa, mainly whites. And it was very difficult to know what they were doing. And sometimes I think when Comrade Mfazo and Comrade Swanepoel are saying our systems were very unique and not easily detected, they really meant it because with all those big antennas about the South African embassy in Mbabane, they couldn't detect anything, even though we had at some stage operate around the area. And if you remember, well, that time the special branch was very vicious around that area in Swaziland. Yeah, that is the experience. In Mozambique, because I had to leave Swaziland, we had applied for to get married with my husband. He was stationed in Mozambique. So by then, the General Secretary, Secretary General had approved that you can get married. So I had to move to Mozambique to join my husband. So then I joined Comrade Lififi. Those who know him, Sipiwe. It wasn't difficult because we were staying on the 9th floor, the flat we were staying in, and it was easy then to mount the antenna on top of the roof without being detected, and it couldn't be easily seen there. So we could operate there without being detected. And most of the work, of course, was done also by Comrade Lififi because he was already there. I could only assist there and there. So that is the experience that one had. I hope you were able to understand the practicalities because others dealt with the technical aspect of everything. I thank you very much.
Okay, I hope things are getting, the story is coming together. So we moved from Ms. Jackie talking about the Lutuli detachment, June 16th detachment. We then moved further talking about inside, moved to talk about Swaziland and Mozambique, where we operated. What we are now going to do is that Friki is going to talk about in Vienna, in Luanda, where they were based, the radios they built, the convoys they were in, etc. Fort is coming, who's going to talk about the Northern Front. Over to you, Friki.
Good morning. I normally like to refer to names and people as I used to know them, like Mrs. Jackie. In our time, maybe let me indicate, I'd like to give you the experience from a teenager because the portion of my topic really stems back from 17 years to 19 years of age. And I'll try to recall as much as I can. So yes, I tend to like to refer to people as I used to know them then, like Sister K, everybody, regardless of the rank in the department, used to say that. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, Madam Speaker, order, how is to know. Chief Paul, that's how even today I still call him Chief Paul. And I understand what say protocol observed. I'm tasked to give experience around Vienna, but the life in CC does not start at Vienna. You know, you don't just jump and walk up and say, yeah, I am at Vienna. You get promoted to Vienna, then eventually to Saka. And you train to be a bit arrogant because you're in the national headquarters. My experience, and I think most of the CC group of members started with joining MK. Okay, firstly the ANC, and then get coerced to join MK because you're still young then. We leave the country thinking, you know, they'll show you SOMAFCO on the SASPU, South African Students Press Union. They'll show you SOMAFCO with all the labs and all the stuff. So you leave the country confused. Yes, you get the glimpse of radio freedom, you know, the crying of AK-47, you get excited, you skip the country, you get to Charleston Transit Camp in Lusaka, and they coerce you to join MK. Because they'll give you a choice. Do you want to go to school or you want to go to the army? Right. I remember in my group, there were 30 of us. Although when we left the country, we said we want to go and be trained, become MK soldiers. But at the same time, because we're still young, we still wanted to pursue our education training. But then in our group, there was out of 30, there was only one person who chose to go to the army. And the rest were going to school. I think I was 16 years old. 16 years. And it was McDonald's, Comrade McDonald. So the picture was not good. And then for him now, he wanted to motivate us to go to the army, and he brought Chief Nkanka, John Nkanka, to persuade us. Unfortunately for him, Chief Nkanka spoke about the importance of taking education. And it didn't turn out well, but eventually we stripped our minds and then we went to the army. But the cohesion comes to those who went to the army, they leave quicker. Within a week or two, you leave the transit camp. You arrive there, you find people within 3 months, 4 months waiting to go to the restaurant. So eventually you end up changing your mind, you go to the army. Right? Then you arrive in the transit camp before you get to the CC part, and then we went a group called the Young Lions, right? Some are brown chickens because our uniform was brown. And then we went to East Malaki, Camp 101, Kakulami, and then I was based at Kwelo Base. And then my interaction with Kulukov was through, we have subject modules, right? One of them was communication. And then I fell in love with communication because of this right father. He's become so motivated, so excited. And then I think beside your AK-47, your firearm section, and okay, your engineering explosives, they were extremely sensitive. Even with AK-47, although you like it, but you couldn't handle it the way you would be allowed to touch your R109 during the communication class. So I fell in love with communication. In fact, I recruited myself into CC after the basic training. And then after basic training, then I joined CC in the camp. And what I used to like about maybe what I need to do now to give you how the technology that Comrade Moss is right and fast that we're talking about was deployed, firstly starting from the camp. We have CC, Communication Center, with the support, those who don't know us a bit. Okay, there'll be telecom wires going to bases, and then Comrade Moss indicated where, communication is a problem, we link with the R109 into the telephone. And we have the switchboard, and then at the base, each base, the guardhouse will have a telephone. So you ring, and then the flag will drop at your switchboard, and you pick up and then say, connect me to Microsoft, for example. Then you switch and connect and you listen. Okay, because they're not supposed to be talking their own thing. And then when you start talking their own thing, you warn them, comrades, you need to stop this, otherwise I'm going to cut you. And then from there, I was fortunate to be chosen to a group that went to Malaysia. Our training center was Malaysia for Moscow. Moscow, so on. That's where we started our training, and we had a new group, all Comrade Monde, Comrade Mawila. They were the old guys, they were doing R140. Okay, and Brahmos, the radio was so difficult for them. They couldn't grab the concept. I remember in one session, you had the Russian instructor with the Russian interpreter, because they couldn't grab the concept. And then he told the interpreter to tell them that they must go out and take a grease and grease their head. So information can come through. And then, eventually those, I'm not sure how selection was done. Probably Chief Paul will maybe give an indication to that. Because out of that now, there was probably called Al-Krimi from the basic communication training. We were then taken to Rwanda, first time on passenger plane, because when we went to Angola, Malanje, we were put on a cargo plane. Right? Yeah, that's not that experience. And then we're earmarked now to go for further training in Moscow, in USSR then. We started at Moscow, then Leningrad, what is now St. Petersburg. There were 10 of us. Unfortunately, Conroy really has to come back because somehow we're told he was sick. That's when we specialized with the R57. I think one of those radios that Comrade Muslim and Cyclone Fuzz were talking about the base station and also the R354. Not the small one, the one that transmits 500 minutes per minute. And then we went to Russia And we're sent to St. Petersburg. I remember we were on the train overnight. We arrived at St. Petersburg, and then it was around 2 o'clock or so. After lunch, so it means the next meal was going to be supper. But because you cannot leave soldiers idling, when we arrived there was a TLB, digging trench. I think it was 2 meters deep and almost like 5 meters wide. And it was going to go another 10 meters or something. So they stopped it at 7 meters. They let it go. And we were called in with shovels to finish the rest. And we thought maybe they're buying time to suffer. So we took our time. And we have the captain, the unit was captain, who came to us. He came to check around 4 o'clock. We took it easy. Then he said, guys, you're supposed to finish this before dinner, right? And no one is going to eat before you reach your targets. But being soldiers, yeah, we managed to do that. And then I think that's where we're trained on the antenna I'm supposed to talk about. I'm not going to go into the technical part of the antenna, right? And then we came back, and then we arrived. I think first time when we went to Russia, the new CC training center was still being developed. Okay, I'll assume it was the concept developed by Chief Paul, because he was in the forefront, making sure that we work very hard. Okay, when we suppose as CC, you know, you are the most educated, you hear the technology, it means you are the clever ones. No manual labor for you. Okay, you're supposed to relax and wait for your shift, and then so that you can transmit, but not with Chief Paul. Okay, now after that training, yes, we came back to Rwanda. Now I think almost the center was complete. You know, they dug the trenches for the trucks which house the radio stations. We have R118, 140, and you know the R357. Okay, and only certain, we're 9 of us who are allowed to operate that one. Okay. And yeah, the CC in Vienna, although Vienna itself militarily was a transit camp, but the CC was a permanent base. Okay, you know, I came to realize, Colonel Chief, that those who were chosen to stay at the CC center in Vienna, it meant that we called from China. In China, it's when you get called to go home and then be on special operation and all stuff. And now with CC, because it was such a critical and crucial skill, you cannot send a lot of people. That's why you hear it's like the files where it's called, a few people were deployed and they will coordinate communication with the rest of the people. So basically, if you are based, if you are assigned this unit, you just, you know, accept gear yourself when you're going to man the base. Okay. You better do that, otherwise and then you end up in Kulukoti. Kulukoti was a prison. If you misbehave, we had prison. Small, you know, with the door is like almost like a butler door, butler window. You sit there squatting there. The only time you go out is when you go to toilet. And then they'll bring food, you'll eat in there. Right? So you have to behave and so on. But with Kulukov, as Comrade Mose and Sergeant Fabre spoken, alluded, you have to be disciplined, you know, and you also have to be secretive, because you're receiving information from the camps, information from Lusaka, you know, going to the regional head office of the military. So you have to be secretive and disciplined as well. And, you know, come to think of it, Chief Paul, I was so secretive to the extent that I used to suffer from malaria. And the highest stage of malaria is cerebral. When you have cerebral, you're fine. You could say things, you could do things and all that stuff. But one thing, you know, come to think of it, I've never mentioned, was the secret of CC, of Kulukov. That's how we trade in terms of secrecy and so on. Come again? No more Kulaganda. Honestly speaking, you know, sometimes when I think of it, it's like, yeah, quite interesting and so on. And then, yes, we have Chief Loboyo, but the dominant was Chief Paul because he likes working. Yeah, put the case. And really, but he used to say, but remember, SCC, we couldn't join the rest of the group from the transit camp to go and do manual labor. Anyone would be protected. Yes, we'll have over 3 days, but there'll be those days that you feel like, you know, it's a free day, and Chief Paul would just come in. They used to drive was used to host R118. It was taken out, and you just arrive. You never know that day what mood he's in, and then you'll be like, you know, you're soldiers, you're sleeping like I don't know what, and so on. We start waking them, and but one of the things that used to piss us off, okay, but you know, as a soldier, maybe let me indicate when we arrived at the camp, I started really learning real English, right? Because the first English we're taught was 1 + 1 is not always 2, because technical situation changes from time to time. There's no rain in the army, but an army in the rain. You comply and complain afterwards. Those were the 3 English lessons. Even today, I still apply. So, you know, we went to Moscow, St. Petersburg, Leningrad, then to learn on how to host this antenna, 110 meters. It looks like is it your FM towers? Okay, it's the long one, red and white. I mean, there's your stay wires. Okay, then you assemble this, 110 meters, you put your stay wires, and then there's a way that you lift it up. Okay, and if you don't do it correctly, it will burn. Then you have to start from fresh. I think before it used to take 3 days to lift this up. Now, Chief Paul, I don't recall him being trained on this because I think we're the first group who went for this. But he had the name to tell us how to do it. You understand? Remember, it's not a nice thing. I mean, if this thing takes 3 days to lift up, okay? When in training, it was easier. You know, they would understand, they say you could bring it down and so on, but not with Chief Paul. I think we ended up doing that within 6 hours in a day, you know, lift it up. But eventually we got used to it, but it really used to really get us angry to say, who does he think he is? You know, we are the specialists on this thing, but he comes and tells us, and we come on a bad day when you think you were relaxing, you say, guys, I see you saying food. Okay. And yes, the CC then was the communication hub for MK. Okay, it was linking Lusaka with Rwanda and all using those radio stations. I don't think they had 357 in Lusaka. Okay, we were the right, but you'll hear them when they come in. You see, you tune the frequency at a certain time, and then when they, depending on which tune first, when the other party tune it, he's trying to find, you know, his status, and they'll come in as if they are operating from 357. You know, that's how. And this is as you're mentioning, those who were based in Lusaka. Every time you mention that, I listen attentively because I'm identifying those who are still alive. I'm waiting for them to age, then I'll come after them. It's a way to reach out. We used to scared of Lusaka. We used to be like that, and they were not taking any nonsense. You couldn't stammer with Moscow. Stammer means like, you know, you're supposed to, then stammer will be like, and then they won't be tolerant of that, and then they'll take you off, and then there's a code KYB, you know, it's change operator. You know, we've got no time to waste. We are national head office. Then we'll now take out frustration on the ones at the camps. Okay, because they communicating with us. We have Kakulama, we have Bango, we have Kibanshe, right? And then eventually there was a new camp was opened just in Malanje town. It was like a suburb camp, the one we had. And then the other role we used to play is we used to have convoys. It's a chain of trucks. Okay, we'll transport food and logistics to the camps from Luanda. You go Malanje East, you go to the Northern Front, and I take Comrade Fort, we'll talk about that. And then we'll use now the 109, and we used to have the one that we have kind of called the name Comrade Mons. And then we'll be now controlling the convoy. Ours will be simple. The truck in front determines the pace, right? But if the convoy breaks, now you just get told reduce speed, okay? When the convoy gets congested, and you say increase speed. So basically, we're the communication hub for the convoy. And then speaking of convoys, I know Comrade Ford is going to talk about the Northern Front, but we also had victims. I think we got engaged. I remember 2 ambushes. You see, in Angola back then, it's like you couldn't drive from Bloemfontein to Johannesburg on your own. You do that, you are at the risk of being captured by UNITA. Okay? Now you have to have a convoy of military trucks. Even the civilians, trucks don't wait for anything because they lost trust in the APLA, Angolan army, because when UNITA just fires in the air, they run away and leave them. So they used to wait for us. So one of our engagement, I'm not sure Chief was my convoy. Our truck had the logistic of the convoy, it means the food for the convoy. At some point, the convoy will stop and then food will be dished out, right? On that day, what was that town? We met 40 trucks of Angolan civilians, and ours were 30, including the diesel tank. The diesel tank used to be the last one. 40 of them with about, they say, 12 of us, and then we have to escort them. I remember saying, no, but the chiefs, they should say we should leave them behind. This is the reason. But MK being MK, they said, no, we're taking them with. And then we had a military truck and then 4 civilian trucks, military, 4 civilian trucks. And our truck was instructed to go in front. So I'm the radio man for the truck. And it was also holding the convoy food. And then they were told, now dish out, okay, because we're not going to stop anywhere now. And when they came back, we were 14 in the truck, 3 in front, was the driver, a comrade Pet, and myself. And then there were 11 other comrades at the back. So when they came back and we got into the truck and they began to eat, the message came through to say, convoy must move. So we're in front, we're moving. Then the convoy was going and they kept on saying, reduce speed, increase speed, and all that stuff. And then the driver and this comrade, okay, by the way, female comrades were few. Okay, and that's why we call them flowers of the revolution. And to be sitting next to one, okay, it was like every Christmas all the time. Okay, but now for me, I got irritated because I became the joke of the two, because mine was like reduce speed, increase speed, and they were laughing at me, right? And then to be laughed at by a female comrade, you know, it's like being sent to Kulukoto, right? So I was really not happy about this thing, but in that process, I think what happened, you know, when I try to replay the situation is normally, you know, it's the road are narrow. Okay, it's very difficult for 2 vehicles cross each other from them. And then sometimes you have a UNITA operating within the civilian trucks, and they will know exactly where the ambush spot is. It means that's where they wait for you, right? And then one of the civilian trucks, if one switched off, it breaks the convoy. And it will take a while before we recover or discover that the convoy is broken and it's so reduced speed and all that stuff. And then that's when our truck went to ambush spot. Okay. What I remember, my chief and everyone, is I heard an explosion and I saw black papers flying. So I thought, the radio we have, the one in Mount 6 years, got a black battery, and then the mouthpiece and everything here. I thought it's the battery exploding. But then I heard the machine gun. Then I remember saying ambush, ambush 3 times, and I went out. But in no time, I recovered. And Chief, I'll later explain, not in the group, how I survived this ambush. I recovered. But then it was like I'm in a shack. It's raining, and people are busy hitting with sticks. The sound of the firepower, right? Because all the firepower, I think our truck was the only one in the ambush spot, right? And I couldn't move. I sat against the passenger's seat, basically facing the front was behind. But I can only move my upper body. I was paralyzed downwards, right? And now the Russian trucks were so designed, so well designed, like when you sit in the truck and you want to open the door, the handle is here. Now I'm looking against the handle. Now mine was, okay, I can only move my upper body. Let me rather open the door. Or the first thing is I lift up my head and I realize the 2 comrades are within a gun. You could see the way they. Then I tried now to reach for the handle. And in terms of deployment, most you have a machine gun pointing this direction and depending on the formation. And this guy could see my hand and he would start firing because he could see that somebody is alive. And luckily I was on the floor and you could hear it hitting the roof of the nest. And then bazooka, I think we missed 4 times with the bazooka. Okay, I thought I heard the first shot of bazooka. We were told by the chief then to say, UNITA, when they retreat, they fire bazooka. So when they fired bazooka, I thought, oh, 10-7. Oh, no, it was not 10-7 then because we were told communism and other stuff. So I thought, thank you, they finally leave it. And then the firepower will follow. Another one, the 4 bazookas. I think Chief, you told me that actually it misses the cap of the bucket and the back, and then so we missed 4 times. So that was our first 6-year experience on ambush. Okay, but what irritated me most with that ambush is like somebody came alive out of the truck. It was like a set. We were taken back to Angola, and then decision was saying the convoy moves on. We're not gonna return because of this, and then we buried the late comrade in the north. And we put in a stretcher in the hospital in Rwanda. But I don't know how news got out. But what I was told is, or what I could hear also from Cubans and Angolans to say, there was an ambush and somebody came out miraculously alive out of the truck that was supposed to be, right? And they all came to look at this person. Remember, you were in pain. And when you try to get sleep, and they will wake you up, they start talking with this person and so on. So that was our first ambush. Our second one, this was a heavy one for us. And I was stopped from going on convoys. Really, that was great. I used to love convoys. Sitting in a camp for long, Yasangana. So convoys like going out, you go and see people. And the 2 chiefs, they didn't want to, guys, and understand one chief, okay? And then we had another one. It's the one we had APCs for the first time. These were armored personal carrier vehicles. All the chiefs, I'm not sure ours were left behind. They all wanted to be in these armored vehicles. And I was on duty that day. I always liked to be on duty. I liked operating. But I remember the night before, we had Christopher Nyong. He was in the list. And you could see Christopher is scared. The convoy is going to the north. When you are in the list of convoy going to north, it's not a nice thing because there's no guarantee of when you're going to come back alive. No, I saw Christopher. I said, Christopher, but you're scared. Then I asked Chief, can you swap positions with Christopher? I'm programming, but you can see even when you speak, this guy is just waiting for Chief to say, okay, swap positions and so on. But then Chiefs were adamant, you're not going anywhere. I was on duty that day when the message came through to say the convoy, is hit by another ambush. We lost 27 comrades and about 6 of our comrades from CC. Okay, now think of it. You're receiving the names, like comrades Morrison. It's like the first would explain the coding and all the stuff. So you write the numbers as you receive them, and then you write the deciding code, and you subtract. And when you receive, you subtract, and it gives you a letter, and you start getting names, right? And one of them was Christopher. Yeah, I think it was the first from the CC side that I picked up, and then you start picking others and all that stuff. Yeah, it was painful. Even today, I still shiver when I think about it. So in terms of our operation as CC based at Diana, we were doing that. And then the role of the antenna, we are also now working on establishing direct communication with South Africa. As the comrades have indicated, the technology used by the Russians was really powerful, and it was the direct communication. Even the CIA, if I call from training, they had to transmit to a satellite and wait for a certain day when the satellite in the area and they'll receive and all stuff, but we could communicate directly to them. And maybe in closing, just to emphasize the importance of CC as General has indicated, how important that was. And by the way, we're not just CCs, okay? Because with Act 353, you could also set up explosions and then trigger them remotely. Okay. Just to close to show the importance of communication. Okay. Maybe 2 cases on social level. I know you saw what happened when WhatsApp went down and Facebook went down. Livestock, right? On the military side, if you recall, I remember. Oh, by the way, I was moved to Lusaka because the doctor said if you don't move him out of Angola, he's going to die. Okay. And one case, I nearly shot a Russian advisor. Right? And he was my best friend. I had malaria, cerebrum. I woke up. So we had the, chief with these designs, we have a double story. But from wooden stuff. So I was on top. I woke up, I looked through the window. I saw a boar. Okay? And what's that? Not in the CC. So I went down and you go in our kitchen, it's open in front, and then the fridge at the back, and they wait for AK-47. And as I entered, the comrades said, hey, and I was not talking, I went straight for AK-47. I pulled one in, and they were like, what's this now? And he saw me, and he was coming to wish me well, or happy, hug me, and so on. When I saw him in a cock, AK-47, that's when he jumped and grabbed the AK-47 and so on. Then I was eventually taken to Lusaka. Obviously, we also had a satellite office in town at the chief office, and that would be relaying now messages from Lusaka, and it will go to the regional command and so on. I moved to Lusaka, and at some point, I remember CJK and Chief Wiseman came and committed to this. And I was told to get into the car with him. We drove off. So there was another operation being set up. If you remember in Pukutatswana, there was once a coup there, and it was squashed. Okay. They did it on their own. They never consulted anybody else and so on. Then there was another operation now to rekindle that operation, and I was going to go in as the operative, thanks to the camp. They decided to unveil the ANC and all that stuff. I had all my alibis, go to school, technical high school, and all that stuff, and so on. And we're waiting, and within I think a week or so, two, and then the clerk announced unveiling of the ANC and everything done. So this is the life of CC through the eyes of a teenager, and we used to call it abnormal life. With now today, if you go, Madam Speaker, if I hear Juju was saying we'll go back to the bush, I say you go along. At least this time around, we covered. Okay, so yeah, that's our life, and then really our life is although I think during our tenure, we were mostly in Lusaka, but we knew of Sisiyeti. We knew that we've got the mother. And then we have mostly Chief Wiseman was also that side. We have Chief Luvoyo and Chief Paul. Chief Luvoyo was like our mother to us, but Chief Paul behaved like our father, but a very strict father and demanding one. But we're thankful for that chief, because some of us today, where I'm working, they don't believe that one can work 36 hours flat out without sleeping. There's a type of training that we have, type of discipline that we call the name. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, Friki. Yeah, no, Friki Sisiyeti did quite in all his units. They're all here. Maybe, I mean, if the people who were in Vienna with you, Friki, if you may stand up for Sisiyeti, please stand up, you guys. General Boyce now, Peters is now running the electronic warfare inside the Defense Force. Thank you for coming, sir. We really appreciate the time. We know how busy you are, but you've decided to spend some few hours with us. We don't take that lightly. I mean, given the fact that we still have to do all the national duties and defend our country. So we really would like to, I mean, the stories of Friki, there are many. And I also remember the day Friki wanted to swap places and I refused because there was a lot of work to be done. I mean, but we say, may his soul rest in peace. You know, one of our comrades left for the convoy and never came back. The number of them. And that's the history and the background of CC. But we will continue with our program. Sorry, I've forgotten my glasses today, so I can't see. I have to get assistance from Basel from time to time. I left my glasses, so I will not ability to see the next program. The font is not yet here. So we continue. I think this would be the last or second last, and then we go for lunch. My understanding. Yeah, Friki was about 17 years. He was one of the youngest soldiers of CC, and you know, but he's now in ESCOM. And don't blame him about all this. He didn't want to do this. I sometimes phone him. He's based in the Free State, and say, "Friki, what's happening?" So, but he's doing well. I mean, it's very good for us as to see your young soldiers, Kenny, as young teenagers who grew up in the Defense Force, in the military, in MK, later went to school, part of the Defense Force. Oh, okay, this is the CSI Hadiakas, yeah. Are they, I'm not sure, Sipo, are the guys online or where are they available online or are they here? Can you check them? I mean, we have two young scientists to talk about the science of military. Are they, or not yet in? Okay. So what we will do at this point in time, Kus, can you check if lunch, how far is lunch? We will break. We would rather come back a bit earlier. I just want to find out how far lunch is. But to summarize this morning session, colleagues, is that we have quite very interesting speakers in the afternoon day, and you will hear much more deeper stories about our unit. So don't go away, both online and here. But the morning, I think, gave a good perspective for you to understand the role of CC. I mean, these messages would be that were carried by us, would be messages to Vice Jackie, to Owen Campbell. Okay. Would be messages to Owen, I mean, the president, would be messages to JM, to Chris about operations, would be messages from Angola to headquarters, would be messages from the front back to headquarters, would be operations messages, would be messages of people who are underground looking for weapons to be sent to where. Now you cannot, even if there was WhatsApp at that time, use your normal phone to communicate such messages. You just cannot, right? So that is why these messages had to be encrypted. Basically, these messages had to be concealed, to make sure that the enemy, remember the enemy was all the time wanting to know what is happening between a unit somewhere and headquarters, who is communicating what. In the military, intercepting your enemy's communications is point number one of defeating your enemy. If you want to defeat your enemy, that's where you start. If you cannot intercept the enemy's communications, your forces will struggle to basically fight. The Second World War, as Vaso said, was fought through communications. It was an enigma what you saw that what happened in the English Channel, or what you saw what happened during the winter that led to Zhukov outside Moscow, was all based on communications. You deploy your forces after you have realized what is happening on the other side. So really the role played by Mrs. Jackie and all of us as your kids in the liberation movement, and continued in the South African National Defence Force, which a lot of our people are still settled within the signals and communications, is the training that you gave us. I mean, is the discipline that you instilled in us. It is the commitment that you showed us. There's Fort coming. Fort, it's your time to speak, Fort. And come in, Fort. Come in. Yeah. Sorry, Fort. He's playing delayed. Please forgive us. Sorry. Please.
I just want to let you know, comrades, that also from that it was really hard at times, but we were insisting on rules because we knew that if you pass a certain time, then you can easily be located where you are. Now, one day, when after integration into the SANDF, I was in Luwaka with a group of trainees who were there. And then they were briefing us about the situation and their experiences of the war of liberation. This guy doesn't know me at all, doesn't know anybody. We are all just new trainees that have arrived. So he says to us, I was in communication during that time, and we used to intercept the Angolan communication easily. We knew what they were going to do, and they used one frequency. So, and then he said afterwards, we knew the ANC was communicating, but we never found them. He doesn't know me, but he's just briefing us of the situation. I felt very, very good. I didn't say I was the one, I just kept quiet. I just kept quiet, and I think we did a very good job. And if we said 15 minutes, we wanted 15 minutes for a reason. And we were the only liberation movement that used that kind of communication. So really, when I say you need to be proud of yourself, you should be proud of yourself. So well, thank you so much. But I just want to show that when you came in, I hear Paul says you were youngsters. But when they came also, I was given a group of young girls and they said, and men, and they said they are trained. Osanepul or Helen or Late Dorothy, Dodos, there were many girls. And you say there were no girls, but with me there were many. And I'm looking at these youngsters, I say to myself, what am I going to do with these kids, you know? But I had to withdraw what I said. When I gave them work and I said, oh, they would move, they would move. We didn't work with one, we worked with all these areas I've mentioned, but they were really, really wonderful. So I thank you all for your hard work.
Do you have the VGA to HDMI?
Just HDMI.
Right? So you didn't get the VGA to HDMI? No. The good thing. Now you can talk. Okay. Can you mail it to and then you project? Just 1 minute, we're just organizing a presentation. I'll hand over to Fort. Fort is going to talk about the Northern Front, and the experiences that he had in the Northern Front. Sorry he couldn't be on time. He's playing late. But over to you. This presentation will be shared with people online. So
Good afternoon, Chair, your program director, Major General Sisweke, Mamo Mahatabe, Mambara Gambeta, members of the CC group, other guests present here. Thank you so much, and the technical team that assisted us. I will just go straight to the to the Northern Front. Just to say the background is that 1986, we were in Kibash, Camp 18, and the regional commander, Timothy Mbwana, affectionately known as T, arrived with Commissar Boris. Commissar Boris was a Russian officer. I think he was a colonel in the Red Army, based in Rwanda, and was heading all the military advisors in Angola. Then they talk about some presence of UNITA, and that there must be vigilance mounted. So what happened was that there was a reinforced truck platoon that was placed in Kibasha residence in town. Together, it was also reinforced by some comrades that were in Bango camp that were doing a refresher course. But that didn't actually yield anything because there was never an engagement. We then left to Ruthfest, Malanja for communication. I can remember Comrade Teta Mabuza. You remember he was a young one, I think he left the country being 15 years old. So we were together with communication that we were going to specialize in Brenda and Kondo, affiliated with the Brenda issues here. Then we later in following year 87 and 88, then there was UNITA, then troops were mobilized. The communication is led at the time by the late Comrade Paki Pogwa Pongwana and Comrade G, who is the program director here. They assembled the communications team and then as part of those units. So there will be artillery, there will be engineering, topography, and others, and general troops that were prepared for going to the war. We arrived at Kibasha, and then there was some preparation. We needed to understand first the enemy, and because we knew that they've been supported by SADF in the main for a very long time since their existence, even yes. And what happened is that they had moved from after the defeat in Kitokanabal, the forces of UNITA then moved to the central and north of Angola. And when they were there in the north of Angola, communists that were there would remember it was an FNLA territory. So UNITA kind of took over that territory, and they had bases in the north and in Zaire, and that's where they would have been trained and by US and also by the French. I'll talk about that later. And on our side, we had also to prepare just to know our strengths in terms of what I've just spoken about. Strategic deployment to all bases. When we arrived there were 3 camps there. There was Pareta, there was Camp 13, which was the main training center, which was the biggest. Then adjacent to it was Camp 13 Quattro. And then if you go back down Kibasha, then we take another direction, then there is Bango there, which was doing a specialized courses for those companies that were to be deployed inside the country. So the deployment of the Northern Front regiment was to be strategic in terms of defending, because our main thing was to defend that was our primary task, was to defend our own camps, because we had comrades there, we had many of the trainees that were inadequate to fight. So we had the responsibility, but fortunately they also had their trained personnel and officers. So we were just in reinforcement in case everything had to happen. And they had to make some alterations even in terms of their training programs, both in Camp 13 and in Pango, in terms of going, for instance, for the tactics and for physical, which was they had to do them in the terrain. And in terms of the Northern Front, there were two major geographical areas that were operating from. There was Luanda, so you would have many companies that were coming with convoys from Luanda, and they would have all the armament necessary. They would come in, and there would be those that are now in around Kibashi that I was talking about. And in around Kibashi, the headquarters that was chosen was a small, I don't know, it's not in the town. It was called a village called the Parete. That's where the tactical command was. So Prati, which is Timothy Mkwena, who was the regional commander, so played two roles. He was still a regional commander, but he also was part of this leading this, and he stayed there for many months. And Prati had wisdom because he was part of the Eastern Front that was there in 1983 and 1984. So his presence was very so crucial. And then there were other comrades. Ourselves were represented in the command, or yes, by a comrade, I think it's a retired General Themba Bau, who knew him as triple commander. So he was the one. Then the unit commander was Comrade Alex. Yes, and they were both specialists in communication. They've been to Soviet Union. They've done a number of those courses. So we really had a sufficient personnel. But in all other areas, there were those communication stations. And so throughout the operation, in case I forget this, throughout the operations that we had over those years, that period of time, communications played a central part because the information flow would come through communication. And people of communication, or officers of communication, Kulukov as we call it now, were trained in concealing information, secret and all that. So the information, even like if I'm with a comrade here, the next one doesn't know what I'm doing. He will only know what he will be doing when he's on duty, and I wouldn't know when he's on duty what is it that is, because it was that top secret kind of arrangement. We then had 8 encounters. The first encounter that I can remember was the unit that was coming from Kibasha to the field. And we had Comrade Tajwayo, who was part of the CC. Unfortunately, he couldn't come today. He had an apology. Comrade Tajwayo called, I was on duty, unfortunately, that day. He called to say, Fort, Singana be ambush. And then I said, okay, that we was calling me that. Then we went to the administration to report, and then all the necessary things were happening. They were actually they found themselves within the enemy territory, kind of, you would say, territory or enemy base. But they fought, they turned that to a skirmish, and they managed to drive those bandits away. I think they got scared themselves. They got scared. They were not expecting them. But some of our guys communists were hurt. No one was. No one was. We didn't have a casualty in that particular one. We also had. I can just share maybe the other seductive ambush. This is 2nd May 1988. We're in Parete. I know because the previous day, I was doing presenting May 1st political speech as assigned by Komisa, who was there. So we then the 2-3 trucks they go out. Second or third village after they left, then there's they detonate a landmine, but it was just not strong enough landmine. Then we got a call. One of the comrades, because in part of the preparations, we recruited comrades from the troops, and we just gave them a refresher course so that they could use radios, those small ones, and 105, 109 for the terrain, but because we wouldn't be able to reproduce ourselves, we few as officers, and then that's fine. That took place. So this is one of the assistants guys. He was Comrade Howard Nyak. He calls us. So there's this engagement, and okay, fine. Then we get, because what had happened after that, we didn't realize, our forces didn't realize that there was the UNITA was preparing to meet them. They had taken positions. So it was an alert that they had made that landmine, and that's why that landmine was not it couldn't explode like for it exploded, but it couldn't make any damage. And that was their plan. So the communists got into ambush. They fought, and then we lost, but we managed to fight back. We lost Howard Nyaka, our assistant. We lost Dr. Hugo in Kabinda, who was based there, and another comrade he was a recruiting officer from the security department. So we lost those comrades, and other few ones that we lost there. Then the other point is that throughout the period of our stay there, we would have reinforcements from the groups that were coming from the training. Others were from the GTR. There's a big one, the group of 40. They all went there. The group of 40. They will come. They were very fit and all that. And they were Umsana Pai, like Okomri to Suzette, Okomri to Kem, Okomri to Prenda, Togo, Padela, or I just forget these other comrades. So we had those comrades that were there as well. And the officers, and so on. Then there was another group from Tanzania. This group was supposed to have infiltrated. It was a big group. It was supposed to be infiltrated as a big group to Swaziland. That's when Cassius Make was and Paul Tikeleti were hit. They were preparing for that. So that's why the thing of having enemy within us, it really became very strong. Then there was another group from Cuba and another one from Yugoslavia. And some of them had trained in various fields within the army. Then the Battle of Piri, I can talk about that. The Battle of Piri was by far the biggest of them all battles that we had. I've just selected few as a case studies about this. Battle of Piri, we got intelligence, gathering information on the whereabouts of UNITA bandits for some time. We'll get them from all our camps, and Piri mainly would feed us to say, comrades, there's a strong, there's a presence of, there's a base somewhere. And we informed the Luanda, such that when, for the first time when our forces came, they stayed at, they took an interval at Kashido, which is the big city after Luanda. And then there was it was now the time of Comrade Ali, who was regional commander. This is because Comrade Timothy Mkwena Patil was had suffered injury and was taken to Cuba, to Soviet Union for medical treatment. So Comrade Ali was taken and he was deployed from Zimbabwe, and he came in. Then there was this briefing, and the deployment was revealed in terms of how is the strategy and the tactical strategy to approach the. So it was a question of when will we get. Otherwise, we were sure that there will be ambush, but it's a question of at which point. Now there were peasants, both residents and mainly traders, who would stay at Kashito, even if it's a week or two, waiting for convoy of MK, because they would need to drive there because they were not military people. And unfortunately, they didn't have much confidence in their own FAPLA forces because they had the tendency of not sustaining the war. But we understood the question of the weakness that was there from the FAPLA because the war, the country was at war. I mean, the entire country was at war. And secondly, their units, especially the strong ones, they had put them mainly in the south of Angola and Luanda headquarters or Cape Town. Just to have a sense of people, if you can know, in a normal country, there would be one army. Here we only have South African National Defence Force. In Angola, there was FAPLA, which is a government. There was Cuba. I'm talking army forces or armies. Cuba. There was Plan is from SWAPO. There was once time Zipra from Zimbabwe, which had bases there. There was South African Defence Force. There was FNLA, and there were officers of Soviet Union Russians and officers of American and other European countries. So you really have a sense that this was a country at war, and it really was at war for some decades. And then then there was this operational plan for the period now, and this the traders, local traders, had to be, their trucks have to be amongst our trucks, so for safety of them. There was also about 2 trucks from Zaire, Congolese, should I say. This is a group that was called Amakatangis. They apparently had a base somewhere in the north as well, but they were part of our convoy. And this was kept kind of secret because we didn't have a policy to support the Congolese Liberation Army or Congolese Liberation Movement. Yeah, but that time they had to be revealed. They were there, then they caught, and we had all of them. We went into the period. Now, the terrain of Angola is, especially the north, there would be like mountains, it's mountainous. The other ambush that I was talking about earlier about losing some comrades, it was because also it was mountainous, and they had this tactic that they would wait for us at Kiev. They would see us. So this is what happened at the Battle of Piri. The Battle of Piri is because it was the closest, but it was not really at the Piri itself, but it was closer to Piri. In case others may argue that. Then the convoy comes. There's a hovering helicopter throughout. There's a hovering travel. And when there was a first hit, the helicopter vanished. It was never seen again. I'll tell you why. Maybe I should just say that. Comrade Herbert Malinga, who was a regional commissar, deputizing Comrade Ali now, after Timothy Mkwena was injured. Comrade Herbert Malinga was the one who was taking over the responsibility, the command, as a commanding officer of that convoy, as a senior one. Even though there was a convoy commander, which is usually, it would be more a junior, but an officer still. So he says that every time, what they had noticed was that first there was a responsibility from MK to report the operations or the movements of MK to Fabla Command in Luanda. This is because we are a foreign army, so they had to know who are the forces on the ground for better security plans and all that. And so he says there's a problem with that command, Fabla Command. It was infiltrated. As such, there would be constant change of the officers in that. So that explains what happened in terms of that, because they had all the information about the movement of that convoy in particular. Then, in terms of the hitting, the enemy decides to cut the convoy by fire. They shot heavy fire, kind of somewhere in between. And then the others were unable to engage. Then there was this. Then the connection, when it does its work, radio operators, they report it to Luanda, they report it to Piri, they report it to Loa, to Kibasha. Reinforcement comes from Kibasha and Piri to reinforce this battle. And then there's mortars, they were shot, mortars, shells, they were shot. The APC, Ahmad Personal Carrier. I hope that I'm getting it right. General Paz, thank you. Yeah, talking about this area. So the APC comes in, driven by Comrade Mali, and there was also Comrade Dr. Bob Mayekis. Dr. Bob Mayekis is a white man, but in ANC, you know, Castro President was ANC command, that is white. So this guy, Bob was a white guy. So they are in that with other comrades. Then after the time, because the war took some hours, it was the longest, as I said. Then they shot, using the gun of the APC. It's a pity, I could have this. I thought this would be working, but nonetheless, then there's shot, and then there are casualties both sides. And Comrade Herbert Malinga explains that they had identified, it was fun because a mountainous area. There was a white structure which looked like they are commanding point, commanding sites. So there was exchange for hours, exchange, casualties both sides, and until the war ceased at some stage. Then when it ceased, in fact, he says, again, Comrade Commissar, he says they were at some stage close to packed like sardines. And so it was easy for us to fight them, was shooting people that are closely, they didn't deploy in a particularly tactical or strategic way. Yes, yeah, and then the battle comes to an end. Can I also say that now is finished? The following day, there's a unit from MK coming to go to that site. Then they went down deep to the battle site. Then they found that there were fresh graves, a number of fresh graves. They also found there was a knapsack and other 2 articles. Now that knapsack on a bag, the importance of it is that there was information and the map of the entire operation and their plan. About 2 days later, after the ambush, Comrade Christian arrived, Chief of Staff, with a helicopter. It was now, I think, it was going to be rescued to prepare another convoy. He comes to the road and then he comes and reports. He reveals what's he reveals what is in the information that is in the That, for instance, there were 287 UNITA members, and that they were planning to cut down. Actually, they were confirming what we knew. They were preparing. Their objective was to cut down the communication line between the training facilities, all those camps, plus the NK in Rwanda, so that those convoys they come to an end. That is what they actually wanted to do. And because there will be food, PowerPoint and all that, and so they wanted to facilitate so that those guys in the camps ultimately they get hungry and demoralized and all that. And then I can just say that other thing is that the MK was able in all this, in terms of evolution, to convert all these, mainly, not all, most of the ambushes were converted into skirmishes. It became a fight, yeah. But I know that there's one that we were outsmarted completely, because we only had like small unit, like 2 trucks. I think that it was irresponsible that those trucks would have gone, because the bulk of the troops had gone out with PT to another, with also, I remember we called it Sishuba, who was from Special Ops, but he was there and he was operating Grand Bay. So it is that time that when we were shooting and was we didn't find them, and they Akishima, I have escorted students, they knew that they were the ones that would come first, but instead they were just 2 trucks that came and then they overpowered them. And then I can just say that there were 2 convicts. One was Panimolo Panoi. Panoi was holding, as a driver of cars, he was holding a steering wheel like this. When we found him, he was bent to ashes. This was a skeleton that was black with ashes. And then there was another convict in the Kamaz who was in a kneeling position, also a skeleton. I'm mentioning this because sometimes they come to me as flashbacks, and I had to go to the psychiatrists and psychologists because those were post-war stress disorder that we had. And many of our companies, they have that problem because there was this limitation that when we returned from the camps, we never got to be taken to professional assistance for that to be able to cope. Yeah. The other thing is that UNITA, they were trained by, it's a French secret service. This comes from the academic paper. I come across with academic paper from from if you Google that, you will find this article. He was studying Stellenbosch. He says that the French Secret Service trained the UNITA for sabotaging. They were sabotaging the road infrastructure and critical buildings. Because ultimately what they wanted was that they would come down from where they were up to Rwanda. But they were fascinated by this MK presence, and they couldn't achieve what they wanted to do. And secondly, we know that in terms of what we, after the particular period, that we secured all our assets and resources. Then comes 1988 date the UN Resolution 45/78 is to be implemented now. And in the negotiations, MK is identified, and the condition was that if the Boers would go back to South Africa, their forces, they want all the camps to be closed down. And so all the camps were closed down, back to Rwanda, including Quattro, was detained there. Now, comrade, program director next to me, is given a responsibility because he was part of the regional command at that time. Is given a responsibility for that, for that operation to withdraw all the forces, including one of his roles. I remember Volvo, he had this unit at Volvo. I don't know what was happening at Volvo. Maybe you tell us that. Yes, but that was another thing where we used in terms of the withdrawal. So they withdrew, they went to Tanzania and Uganda. I can also talk about Geneva Conventions and human rights culture. That throughout the battles that were happening there, largely, I can't claim 100%, I would be lying if I can say that. Largely, there was an observation of those Geneva Convention in terms of how do we conduct ourselves as an army. Because in terms of our political discussions that we had regularly from the times we were training, we knew about these things. These are the things. And Comrade OR had signed, was a signatory on behalf of ANC in the Geneva Convention. There's a part that I found in that. No, OR was actually the signatory of that. In fact, I think it says it was the only liberation army that signed that Geneva Convention, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, this guy, Panda, I want to quote something he says that. He says, despite its weaknesses in the past, and then those are weaknesses, this comes now from the SAF officers and other international military experts that have been observing what was happening in the there will be plan of Namibia, there would have been Frelimo, there would have been Zebra in Zimbabwe. So they knew all those, the strengths of these armies. Now we know that NK, one of its weaknesses was that it didn't have its disadvantages. It didn't have the borders directly sharing with South Africa in all those countries. And so they were mission. But he says, NK achieved gigantic successes in suppressing and routing UNITA forces within Angola's northern provinces. So that's how he captures the strength. Indeed, it was like so. I just forgot there was another quote that I wanted to, no, not a quote, a statement that was done by Comrade Sam Mawaka. They all remember him. Sam Mawaka, the late, his real name is Tsepo Ito. When interviewed, because what happened was that after that battle of Field in particular, the commissariat at Vienna, the armies, they were assigned to interview the survivors of the battle, because it was the biggest and many casualties. It doubled the casualties, that more than double, because it was the casualties, there were 27. So it more than doubled that what we used to suffer in terms of casualties in other ambitions. So, but this is paraphrased. There was serious operational planning by MK commanders before the units. Before the units were deployed to protect local traders and their goods to the north. He refers now to those peasants that were having to take them through. their destinations and their goods and so on. He further says, UNITA was in dire need of replenishments such as weapons, medical and food supplies, as well as pressure from the apartheid regime to intensify military attacks against NP. Yes. Yeah, I think I did say that MK was able to convert many of the ambushes into skirmishes. So I think it was an advantage. The last one was I sit down, I'm quoting from the book by Comrade Fanele Mbane, is one of Mugwenya, with detachment in his latest book, In Transit. He refers, he refers now to the Luthuli detachment. Most of those brave men deserving of salute are now deceased. Their dreams live on and have to be fulfilled. Their sacrifices are the bedrock of democracy. So that is my last quote, because as we were living there, at least there was a sense of all the forces, Cuba, MK, Plan of SWAPO, and all of them that the foreign had left. Then the Angola was left only with UNITA, and ultimately they defeated. Peace was restored. Namibia got its independence. South Africa got its independence. So the political project was achieved by MK. Achieved, and so we were here now. We are left here to be the conveyors of those news on behalf of those who had passed on over the period of times. I just forgot to say that in that battle of period, we lost SNP as 16 soldiers, 2 comrades and come from Tanzania, London, and comrade Chris. I'm sure he was very close friend of comrade Philippe. He was from PAL. So we lost them in announced those days. So that's why there's so much problem.
Please, my children,